All right, we are live for another Travel Tip Tuesday here on my page, The Traveling Lucie. And today I'm really excited to have on my guest Joshua, who is a tour guide in Japan. And he is streaming live with us through Japan. And I'm really excited for the conversation here today and just to delve more into the less discovered portion of Japan. So I think a lot of people have always wanted to travel to Japan, but the road less traveled or off the beaten path is Joshua's specialty. So I'm really excited to talk with him today. Thank you so much, Joshua, for coming on here today.
Thank you, Lucie. It's a pleasure.
Yes, of course. So before we get into the nitty gritty about traveling to Japan and like all of the places that you see, I would love for you to tell people just a little bit about yourself, how you started traveling and how you kind of got to where you are today.
Yeah, okay. So I'm originally from Maine in the US. I grew up there, and then I actually came to Japan right after high school. So I'd been kind of fascinated with Japan since I was a kid. And I was able to take a Japanese course at a college in my hometown, Colby College, and so that kind of gave me the nerve to go to Kyoto and study Japanese, and I ended up staying for 3 years actually, and really fell in love with Japan and was able to get work teaching English, and loved Kyoto, and that was over 30 years ago, so it was much less touristy than it is now. Um, and then I went back. I lived in San Francisco for a while, and then I got the travel itch again, and I went to Argentina, and with the idea of just traveling around South America a bit. But I really loved Buenos Aires, and I was able to find work there also, and I lived there for 7 years.
Wow.
So yeah, so I like to travel, but also if I find a place that I like, then I feel like I want to live here for a while. So yeah, I lived in Argentina, worked in a Japanese corporation, and there I was able to travel quite a bit. I traveled for work a lot. I was able to travel a lot in South America and also Cuba. Back when I wasn't supposed to go to Cuba, but I went to Cuba. And yeah, I really got to see a lot of South America. And I love to travel just because you find out so much about um, what is really you, and what has just been, what you've taken for granted as truth, and but what is just the way that people around you happen to think or something. When you travel, you really get exposed to different ways of viewing the world, and you learn a lot about yourself, and you get more well-rounded in everything, as you know. So yeah, so I love to travel, and then I went back to San Francisco and lived on a boat for a while. Lived on my sailboat, and really had dreams of cruising one day, but couldn't really get it together financially to do that. I still want to do that someday. So I lived on my boat and sailed around the San Francisco Bay a lot, and took people sailing, and that was a lot of fun. But someday I'd still like to live that kind of nomadic lifestyle. And there I met my wife, and sold the boat. And she's Japanese, and she was thinking she'd want to go back to Japan, and I also wanted to live in Japan again. And so about 4 years ago, we, yeah, about 5 years ago now, I guess, we came to Japan, and we were kind of traveling around looking for a place to live. And Kyoto was getting too touristy. She's from Tokyo, but Tokyo's too urban. We checked out a couple other places, couldn't really figure out where we wanted to be. And then by chance, we came to this little town called Gujo Hachiman. And it's just this beautiful, quaint little castle town in central Japan, with the castle up on the hill, and these beautiful stone water works running through the town, and a lot of machiya townhouses. I live in a machiya townhouse, traditional
That looks so
house, as you
cool.
can see. And, yeah, and so we moved here, and so we've been here ever since. and that's how I also got started leading tours, because I was an arborist in San Francisco. I had a tree care company, so completely unrelated. Um, but I did have the language ability, so I was able to get work here as a tour leader. And
So that was your first job there then, was
yeah,
as a tour guide.
yeah, and it was pretty lucky to find it, because I had no idea I wanted to be a tour guide, and
Mm.
I didn't know what I was going to do for work here, but I knew I really wanted to move to Japan, so it was kind of a gamble. And yeah, we worked for a company. I think I could say the company's name, Walk Japan, and so they lead walking tours throughout Japan, and mostly there are a lot of old roads. So the Nakasendo is one of the better known old roads. It goes from Kyoto to Tokyo through the mountains.
Mm.
So that was the old road that they used to take when they would go back and forth to the capital from, like especially during the Tokugawa era, when Tokugawa was the shogun in Edo, and he would force people to go back and forth from their domain and stay in Edo. So they would often travel this road through the mountains, and so portions of that road still exist. The areas that go over the passes, where they haven't been replaced by train tracks and highways and whatnot. And
That's
so
really
they,
cool.
yeah, so they make really beautiful walking roads, and there's still some old inns, ryokan along the way. Some, are hundreds of years old or are still in the same family. And so you get to stay in these old inns and kind of experience, the sort of traditional Japan. And yeah, that's one nice way to travel.
I love that. So for reference for people, because I think a lot of times when people think of Japan, they think of those bigger cities, of course, Tokyo and etc. So when you, in comparison to the other places, like describe where you're at and the kind of areas that you focus in on when you're doing your tours.
Right. So right now where I am is called Gujo Hachiman. If you want to,
Probably
if you
should have
could,
given like paper here. This is how you spell that.
Gujo, Gujo Hachiman, Hachiman. Um, and yeah, and so that's about an hour and 50 minutes north of Nagoya. And Nagoya it's the fourth biggest city if you consider Yokohama apart from Tokyo. Um, and it's in between Osaka and Tokyo. So it's kind of right in the center. And so the Nakasendo goes from Kyoto to Tokyo through the mountains. And a lot of the area is kind of, I mean, there are people who do walk the full Nakasendo still.
Mhm.
You can do it, but you're spending a lot of time walking, through suburbs and stuff like that. So, but there are portions of it that are still very much intact, where you have the Ishidatami, the old paving stones and that kind of thing. Some of them are original. And so yeah, it's a very
Sounds
beautiful.
beautiful.
Sounds beautiful. Yeah. And then the background image is another famous walk called the Kumano Pilgrimage, Kumano Kodo. And whereas the Nakasendo is a road, they would choose the easiest path through the mountain passes for people to travel on. The Kumano is a pilgrimage, so it deliberately is a little bit difficult, and so it takes people up, straight up mountains, across ridges, and down. And there are a lot of really beautiful shrines and temples on the way. And that's not so much off the beaten path anymore, because a lot of people come and do the Kumano pilgrimage. So it's pretty busy, and it's good in a way because it's really revitalized the local economies. Um, and it's also a great way to see Japan. But there are areas that are, much less travel. Also, many old roads, some pilgrimage roads. There's one where we did a tour in particular in Kyushu, And Kyushu is just a great place to travel. It doesn't get, it's getting more tourism, but, and I don't know Kyushu that well, to be honest, but there's definitely worth looking into because there's a lot of really beautiful sites that are a bit off the beaten track. And there's a place called Kunisaki, Kunisaki, Kunisaki Peninsula, that has an old pilgrimage route, and it's for these aesthetic kind of these mountain aesthetics called Yamabushi, which you may have heard of. And so they would, hike up these cliffs and go along these really narrow ridges and walk over these stone bridges over the abyss and stuff. So if you're into adventure, that's another really great place to check out if you like to do a little bit of scrambling and whatnot.
I love that. I do love scrambling. That's like my preferred type of like hiking and everything, getting into those places. So I hear a little bit of feedback. Do you have it up on one of your tabs? Just make sure that it's not open on, I don't know, but if not, then
yeah. How can I avoid? It is open.
Just make sure that's not open on YouTube or something like that. But
yeah.
Okay, cool. But yeah, no, we had a couple of people, and we actually had Andy's travel blog come on here, and he had written something in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, so I'm assuming that you know what he said.
Oh, konnichiwa. Yeah.
Oh, konnichiwa. Wow. Thank you, Andy.
Hello, Andy.
Love that. Thanks, Andy, for adding that in there. And I know Andy. I didn't know that he spoke Japanese, so that's really cool. And we also had someone who was saying, what are we talking about right now? And if we're talking about good hiking spots in Japan. Now, just for anybody who is watching right now, Joshua here is a tour guide in Japan, and he specializes in the off the beaten path in Japan, and he is nestled in the middle of Japan, in a not so popular city, but a city that's absolutely beautiful. And he was talking about some of the places that you can go through in there and just a little bit of the history. And I've actually interviewed quite a few of tour guides, and it's been one of my favorite things because you guys have such a passion and a knowledge behind what you're talking about that's different. Like, you guys really delve into the places that you are visiting or living, I should say. You're living in these areas and you're learning about every little nook and cranny behind the places that you're walking through, and that's a part of your journey and teaching people when they come there. So I'm really curious as to what the influx of people that you see when you're giving tour guides, because you are in a more off the beaten path type of place. Like, where are you seeing people come from in the world? Like, are people actually coming from America? Are they coming from Europe or other parts of Asia? Like, what?
Yeah, we get a lot of people from Australia, actually, because I think, Australians have told me that for them to go anywhere, they have to travel quite a distance anyway, and Japan's almost in the same time zone, so it's pretty convenient for Australians relatively to travel to Japan. So we get a lot of Australians, and they love Japan, but we also get a lot of Americans, and about 40% each, Australians and Americans, and then the rest would be Europeans, but there are more and more people from like Singapore and Hong Kong. And then, of course, there are a lot of Chinese tourists in Japan, but they don't do our tours because our tours are in English. So that's one reason for our demographic, I guess, too.
Yeah, I love that. That's funny. That's actually someone asked that question. I'm glad you answered that, because they said, do you give less traveled tours in Japan in English? So yes, that would be the answer.
Yeah.
And do you is that you only do it in English, or is there a portion of your company that does it in Japanese as well? Or
yeah, if we have guides, so we do have a French guide, and so if people will, if a group of French people want to organize a tour, and I speak Spanish, of course, because I live in Argentina, and then we have an Italian tour leader also, so we can do tours if you have a group. I mean, we don't offer tours for in those languages, But if you have a group and you want to come as a group, then we can provide a tour leader in other languages. I think there's a German tour leader maybe as well. So
That's awesome. I love that. And so a question that I was actually going to bring up that we're getting is it must be tough with COVID for you as a tour guide, obviously, right? Are
yes.
things opening up in Japan now? This is something that I was going to ask you too, is like, how has your job as a tour guide changed? How have you pivoted from that? And kind of what's the scope of what's going on over there?
Yeah, no, it's the tourism industry has definitely been hit very hard. And it's a very conservative, cautious, culture and government in Japan. So they basically shut Japan down. So it's gone back to, in history, like in the Edo era, where people weren't allowed in or out of Japan. It's kind of like that situation. It's very, very difficult. You really have to have a good reason to be able to leave or come back in. So there is no inbound tourism at the moment, and we don't really know when that's going to resume. Um, and I think, yeah, they're not going to allow tourists for the Olympics apparently this summer. So yeah, so as for me personally, of course, I haven't been leading any tours, and so I've kind of pivoted. I've been studying marketing, web marketing, which is something I've always been kind of interested in. I used to do a dabble in that anyway, and so kind of offering my services to hotels, but also companies involved in e-commerce in Japan. And so a lot of people I think are forced to pivot and do something else, which I've pivoted plenty of times to my life, so it's not that big a deal for me. But it is very difficult for a lot of um, the inns and whatnot who depended on inbound tourism. And the government did try to promote domestic tourism. They had this Go To campaign, and so in a way, it was good because I think a lot of Japanese, when they travel, they tend to go overseas. Go to Hawaii is a really big destination, and so this provided an opportunity for Japanese to go and travel. And a lot of people didn't really go to Kyoto anymore because Kyoto has been so overrun by tourism. So now you can go see the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, and there's hardly anybody there, which is pretty amazing because it's usually those places. That's why I wanted to talk about off the beaten path, excuse me, because some of these places just get so much tourism that it kind of, it's not
Takes
such a
away from it.
yeah. I mean, if you go to the Kinkakuji, the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, and you can barely walk because you're just, stuck in a sea of people, and the tour buses are just constantly pulling up. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. It wasn't like that when I lived there 30 years ago at all. And but there's so much to Japan that's worth seeing, that's equally beautiful, that really doesn't get much tourism. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's pretty much put a halt to tourism, and the company is still uh, active. They're still doing their social media, they're researching. They've created at least, I think, 2 new tours, which are pretty exciting. So they're optimistic about the future, but yeah, we don't really know. Everything's kind of up in the air as far as.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is there any plan? Like, have they planned and have they given you any information of like a potential date at this point that things are going to start kind of opening back up?
Well, things were starting to open up, and then they've gone into emergency mode again in some cities like Tokyo, Osaka, I think Nagoya, Hokkaido as well. So I guess there's been a resurgence of the new strain of the virus, and so, which, I mean, it's all relative. If you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem too alarming in terms of, the considering the whole population,
Mhm.
proportionately. So it's hard to say, you know, what if it's a good policy or not. But yeah, I don't. There's no real calculation to answer your
Yeah,
question.
of course. And I love that you mentioned as well that like the fact that people like locals are starting to see more of their country as well, because that's happened, I think, all across the world.
Yeah.
Here in the US, it's happened where even I, like in the last year and a half, I've always had the idea of wanting to visit every state, but it was later down the road. I was like kind of just really happy with going international. I had a bunch of international trips planned last year, and then obviously COVID happened, so I've been exploring more of my states now rather than later. And it's
Yeah.
been super magical. It's been awesome to be able to explore your own area and just understanding that there's beauty everywhere that you go. But really getting into like those off the beaten path areas. And we actually have another question. So in Poetic Night Hiker says, in Taiwan, the tourism industry has turned their attention to the locals, giving them a new product that was not offered before, since they can't travel outside of Taiwan during the local or turning local. And yeah, they're just making, it looks like Taiwanese are making more local tours. And are you doing something similar? Are you doing this as well?
Yeah, so I've thought about that. Of course, for me, it would mean conducting tours in Japanese, which might be a little bit odd to, be a Japanese and have some, gaijin leading you on a tour, which I have done actually in my town, because I created a tour that goes through my town for the company. And so I have led tours through the town, and I've had people come and say, "Hey, Josh, will you lead? I'm bringing a group of people. Can you lead a tour for a day or two?" And I have done that. Feels a little bit awkward, but it is a possibility. I've also thought about doing virtual tours.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a big thing I've seen tour guides doing.
yeah, so even if I'm not charging for it, I mean, I guess I could do that eventually. Some people are doing that, but yeah, I have thought about doing live virtual tours, at least through my town, and then there is more. I, I think a lot of things are changing because of COVID, and one phenomenon that's happening is that of course, people are working remotely, which in Japan is a big deal because they really have this corporate culture, and I lived that for 6 years because I worked in a Japanese corporation when I was in Buenos Aires. Um, everybody works in the same room, even the boss. He'll have his little office somewhere, but they'll all work in the same room, and they're all kind of, they have this work ethic of just work, and work overtime and everything. And everybody's kind of keeping an eye on what everybody's doing. And now they're encouraging more, especially in Tokyo and the bigger cities, remote work. And so people are at home, and they get to be with their kids. And a lot of people, especially younger people, like it more, it seems. They've done surveys, and a lot of younger people prefer to stay home. A lot of the older people don't like it. They want to be where they can keep an eye on everything. But a lot of companies have reported that they are more productive with this system because there's less distractions, and people can just be at home and get their work done. But it also opens up the possibility for people, if they can work at home, then they could also travel, and there's they call it a workation. Workation. Do we say work?
Workation. Oh, that's a new
Yeah.
term.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a Japanese thing. I wasn't sure because they take English words and then they adapt them. So I never know if it's a real word or if it's just a Japanese thing. But yeah, a workation, or in Japanese, wacation.
Vacation. I'm gonna have to start using that. We've been hearing more and more about it here in the U.S. Like, not that term, which is funny, but the aspect of that working remotely, like, it's become a huge thing, I think, all over the world, which is gonna really, when travel really opens back up again, it's gonna it's going to burst at the seams, I feel, because it is, so many people are doing that now. And you're right. Like the younger generations love working remotely. They like that freedom. They like they are more productive because they're doing it kind of on their own time. And I think it's changed the perspective. I don't think, if COVID had never happened, I think it would have taken a very long time, if never, for us to get to this point where companies would feel comfortable enough to have their workers be remote, because now we're in a situation where they had no choice. And I don't think it would have happened ever on that scale if this hadn't happened. So it's very interesting to see. And I think it's going to really change the scope of travel and change the scope of the travel industry too, because a lot of people are doing the what was I going to say? Like a lot of people are going to different places and working from those places, or the co-working spaces are becoming a huge thing in hotels and such like that, and such. So, it's funny. We have he said I would watch a live stream tour of his city, and they told you to become a YouTube tour guide, which is taking. You're actually working on that right now, which I love.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. That's encouraging. Yeah, I have definitely been considering that, and doing some live tours, and maybe doing a YouTube channel. And so
not maybe you're doing it.
Yes, okay, I'm doing it, because Poetic Night Hiker, I think was.
Yeah, poetic night hikers. He can be or they, I don't know, he or she can become your first subscriber. There you go.
Good. Thank you, Poetic Night Hiker. I'm inspired. Great. So I'll do it. I'm committing right now.
Love that. And we also have another question as well from Opal Bright. How has the vaccination effort been received in Japan, and will this accelerate or slow down the reception of tourists?
Yeah, that's
in your opinion, of course.
Yeah, in my opinion. The Japanese, there's two things they don't talk too much about, and money and politics. And while COVID isn't necessarily political, I think it has become very politicized. And so it's hard to say what people are really thinking, but a lot of people seem to be suspicious of the vaccine. And so, at least around me. And so I don't know how much, and they're quite late in rolling it out. It's a very cautious, conservative culture, as I mentioned. And so I think up until now, they've just been treating people over 65.
Mm-hmm.
And in spite of the fact that, apparently going to go ahead with the Olympics, they're I think June 1st is when it's finally going to be available.
Oh, wow. So it's not even available there now.
No, only to people over 65, from what I understand. Wow. Which in Japan is a pretty big portion of the population.
Yeah.
But because I'm hearing, from my family back home and stuff, oh, we got the vaccine. Have you gotten the vaccine yet? So it won't be available to June 1st. So I really don't know, to be honest. I don't know. It depends. I haven't heard a lot about it on the news and the media. But the general, there are people that are all for it and people who are against it. And even within the same, like my in-laws, for example, my father-in-law got the vaccine, but my mother-in-law doesn't want to get the vaccine. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's happening all over the world. I mean, it is what it is. It has become more political, I think, than it maybe should have been. But yeah, there is political tendencies to it just because of this certain landscape of the world that we live in. And that's the question. So they said that they have heard that tattoos are not allowed in some of the baths. Is this changing at all, or are there tattoo-friendly places to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, it is starting to change, especially in the more touristy areas. And the reason is because traditionally, if you had a tattoo, you were Yakuza, you were a gangster, you know. And so they can't really say no gangsters in the public baths. It's not so much that, you know, I mean, you're not really going to be able to tell usually, but it's just you know, people would be, I don't know, they might feel intimidated if suddenly, you know, they're in a bath and they're pretty elaborate tattoos, you know, they're beautiful, full body tattoos. Um, but it just, you know, you're there to relax, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by these kind of scary looking gangsters who, you know, God knows how they make their living, and they're all covered in tattoos. So anyway, most of the public baths in Japan said no tattoos, of course. And I have a tiny tattoo of a turtle on my foot. It's not very intimidating, and no one's ever given me a hard time about it. But
Okay, I thought you were gonna say that they did. I was like, wait, what? Like,
no, but I have, but it's very discreet. It's on my foot, you know, the inside of my instep, so you can't really see it that well anyway. But I have heard of people being denied access just for having, you know, a tattoo on their arm or something.
yeah, like I have a
Because once
tattoo right here, so this would
yeah,
be, yeah.
yeah, in some places it would be difficult, but in the more touristy areas now, they just accept that a lot of people are getting tattoos. And so to answer your question, you want to check first.
Okay.
So just wherever there are plenty of onsen, I think that will accept it, but in the more like local, um, yeah, I've seen signs in some saying, you know, no tattoos, especially the like the hotel public baths and onsen and whatnot. So you would just want to, you know, look them
Be
up and call.
mindful.
Yeah,
Be
and check.
mindful of that. So that's very interesting. That's why I love having these conversations with people
Yeah,
in other countries, because that's one of the things that I think you learn so much from having a discussion or even going to these places is you learn these aspects that are different. Like here in the U.S., it doesn't matter. You're not going to be denied access into anything if you
right.
or have a tattoo. I shouldn't say anything, but like, you know, a bath area or a public area like that. So, you know, the interesting diverse aspects there, just of, you know, I would have never I didn't even know that. So now I know. And I have a big
Yeah.
tattoo here on my side. Like, I guess I'd have to get like the most conservative bathing suit in the world so that they wouldn't see.
Well,
um
that's the other thing. In the public baths, you're not allowed to, in the onsen, hot springs, you're not allowed to wear, unless it's
oh,
a unisex or you know, which are pretty rare, where you'll have both genders, and then it's okay to, you know,
oh,
I
so
think,
then it's a situation where they're
yeah,
okay, you're naked baths. I didn't know that
yeah,
either. So.
because the water is very clean. Yeah, so, and that's another thing that, you know, because that's another rule. You can't wear a bathing suit into the hot spring. So, I mean, talking about hot springs, yeah, there are a bunch of a lot of rules. There are a lot of rules in Japan, and because it's been isolated for so long, and they just take these rules for granted, when foreigners come in and break them, even though it's, you know, like there's no reason why they should know any better. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of is very upsetting to them. And so when you, that's one thing you should really look up before you go to a hot spring. So for example, um, you know, you don't wear your uh, you take off your shoes before you enter the changing area. You wear slippers in the changing area. You don't wear the slippers into the bathing area. I've seen people do that. And then the only thing you would take with you into the bathing area is your little towel, your little wash towel, which does not go into the tub. You just use that to soap up and wash yourself, and as you know, kind of a modesty thing if you want to, um, but you wouldn't be wearing a bathing suit. And then, yeah, you'd never put that into the tub. You can wrap it up and tie it around your head, or fold it and put it on your head, or put it to the side. Um, and so a lot of little rules like that. You sit down when you shower, so you're not splashing water all over your neighbor, because you're seated like kind of right next to each other. So you sit down on a little stool, wash yourself. That's another thing I've seen, you know, foreigners do, is stand up and shower, like spraying water all over the next person. And then women with longer hair also, you have to put your hair up before you get in the tub so you don't get hair in the tub. So a lot of etiquette.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a good idea to look into things a little bit. You know, the whole thing about taking your shoes off. Of course, you take your shoes off before you enter a house, but there's a little entrance way after you go through
Mhm.
the door, which is where you take off your shoes. And a lot of people just take off their shoes out in the street, and that really
Yeah.
upsets the Japanese because the whole point is to not bring in the
Dirt.
impurities. It's not just the dirt;
Oh,
it's like a religious thing. So the street is, traditionally where, animals might defecate on the street and whatnot. So you have all these kind of spiritual impurities as well that you're bringing into the house. So it really upsets them when people just take off their shoes and they're walking around with holding their shoes and then they walk into the house. So you want to, not only do you take off your shoes, but you don't walk around outside
wow.
shoes either.
So
Yeah.
what you're saying is that I need to hire you to literally walk me around everywhere and tell me how to walk, how to
Yeah,
breathe.
maybe
No.
I should do some how-to videos on, how to visit
Yeah.
a hot spring, how to enter a, traditional house, and
Did you
I
say
think
that
there
you already
are.
have these videos or you're going to
No,
be
I had
making these videos?
I've seen them. I've seen them. So I think, yeah, I could make them, but I have seen them. Business cards, for example, if you come for business, there's a whole etiquette around the exchange of business cards and yeah, never write
Wow.
on a business card, on a Japanese business card. Never take notes or yeah.
Wow, very interesting. So
Yeah.
it's so cool to hear like all the little intricacies. And we have a question here too about um what is the one rule everyone should know that upsets or is offensive to Japanese people that most people don't know, which I feel like you went over just a good amount of them, but like, is there one big, huge one that a lot of people overlook?
Um, well, the shoe one is, yeah, I had a hard time getting people to understand the concept of the shoes, believe it or not. um, because uh, yeah, they just, they thought it's hard to tell which is which. What is the difference between outside and inside? Because as I said, you have this
Desk
genkan
area.
entryway, but there are other parts of the house too where you might wear shoes, where it's um, kind of earth level, ground level. Um, Other than that, what's a good? I'm sure there are a lot of them, but it's just not coming to mind. But basically, yeah, like you wouldn't want to hug somebody just after you just met, for example, and especially in California. I lived in California for 20 years. People just hug somebody that they just met. It's kind of a way instead of shaking hands or something. Japanese aren't big into hugs unless you're really intimate. So I would say, uh, respect their sense of space, because the Japanese like to, even though if you've probably seen videos of people getting packed into the subways and that kind of thing, and they have no personal space whatsoever. But generally, they'll have more personal space, and they'll be more. They might seem cold, but it's not so much that. It's just uh, how it takes a little longer to get to know people, and they're more
Yeah.
formal. And so it's good to be a little more reserved and kind of let them decide how much space to give you and whatnot. And I think
Yeah,
if
you have to be cognizant. You just have to kind of read the situation a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think to the Japanese, like a lot of us we have kind of a big energy. We're more flamboyant. We move a lot. Like I lived in Argentina, so I'm always like talking with my hands, and they're more like refined and kind of have a smaller presence. And so, to just kind of be aware of that.
Yeah. And
I
I think
think.
that's probably a big thing, especially, I live in America and Americans are of course, big, like, oh, well, like, I guess I can't even really say that we're huge travelers. Like, a lot of times Americans will go to like the neighboring, as you know, you lived in America, like they'll go to Canada or Mexico or the Caribbean nearby. But of the people that do travel that are in the US, like, they are definitely big personalities usually. And I'm sure that that's a big shift to be able to like accustom to. So I wonder if, is there like a resource? I know that there's, a million resources online, but is there kind of like one general resource that you know of that like maybe people can like easily find like these rules, or is it kind of just like per place, or is it kind of just scattered all over the place? It'd be nice if it was all in one place, but
Yeah, I haven't encountered one place. When I was considering making some of these videos myself, I just looked online to see what else existed. And there are, on YouTube, there are for meeting, proper etiquette for meeting in Japanese, or, again, exchanging business cards, which is much more elaborate. I actually watched the videos. There was a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. The way you hold the card and everything. So yeah, I would just say, YouTube, do a YouTube search for whatever. If you're going to go to a hot spring, definitely look something up on YouTube, or stay in a traditional inn. And I did see a website. I don't remember the URL, but it was a ryokan website where they were kind of posting different ryokan, and they had tips as to how to stay and everything. But
so
it
maybe
is, yeah.
So maybe what you can do is, if you do come across that website again, you can come to the YouTube video and you can post it in the comments, so that people can reference back to it. So if you're watching this, look in the future to hopefully find that comment.
Yeah, ryokan. But if you Google ryokan etiquette, I could do that also. But um, yeah, and as a tour leader, it was always something that was very, very present. Helping people, because I was in the middle. So on the one hand, I want people to enjoy themselves, and it's their vacation and their money, and I want them to have, feel relaxed and have the best experience they can. But on the other hand, I want I want the innkeepers to continue to be open to having foreign guests, and to not be intimidated by it. Because some places in some of these more rural areas, it would take some negotiating to get these people to accept having groups of foreign guests, because of some of the issues that they have had in the past with people not really respecting the etiquette and whatnot. So I do recommend, doing a little research. If you are, again, going to get off the beaten track and go to some of these, more traditional inns and stuff, it would be a good idea to.
Yeah, that actually brings up my next question too, because I was going to ask, when people are coming to the area in which you are giving a tour to, I presume that when you are doing your tours and such like that, that you are kind of giving them a little down, a little run play of what's going to happen and such like that, and what you're going to show them and such. But when people, what do you think is the biggest obstacle, I guess, that you think people are going to have to like hurdle over in going to these more remote places? Because these remote places, I'm sure, just like with any place, I believe if you're traveling somewhere, you shouldn't just go to those big cities. The big cities are big for a reason. They're beautiful. They have great things to admire and visit, but all of your time shouldn't be spent there. And you should be trying to get the actual culture of places in these off the beaten path areas. So I'm sure that there is something, especially in Japan's culture, and from what I've heard in this interview as well, is like, how can they best be prepared to, like, what are they going to overcome in doing that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, one thing, a lot of the traditional inns, although they are changing largely because of groups, because of travel companies like us, traditionally you sit on the floor, you sit on a little mat and eat. And a lot of people had a hard time with that. What do I do with my legs? They like kind of try to stick their legs under the table, and then they'd move, and they'd push the table around and upset things, or and if you ask the usually can provide you with some sort of low chair or something or stool that you can sit on and kind of lean over the table. But yeah, that's often a tough one for people, getting up and off the, getting up and down off the floor and sitting on the floor. And then if you're, for example, a vegan or a vegetarian, it's a good idea to prepare, and they will prepare. We never had a problem. We had very strict vegans, and we were able to accommodate them. But it does require some preparation because the inns will have to, um, you know, get other ingredients. But everybody, we'd always get comments on how impressed they were with how far out of their way the innkeepers went to provide really healthy, complete meals that were vegan. Instead of just taking out the fish and the meat, they would really go out of their way to make these amazing vegan meals. So it is definitely possible to travel in Japan as a vegan, but a lot of the things like the miso soup usually has a fish stock. uh, so if you're very strict about being vegan and you don't want the fish stock, you have to kind of mention that, because they won't think about that. They're like, oh, the fish stock too. Um, so yeah, food requirements are one thing, um, and sitting on the floors, um, probably another. And then you won't find much English when you go to the country.
That's true. So that's
Uh,
also why they need you.
yeah, yeah. But Google Maps, is pretty amazing, and they're getting better and better about putting English signs up everywhere. Um, but
In
you
the
just,
remote places, because in the bigger areas, it's English and Japanese,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In the cities, it's all both. But so it's a good idea. But now, with Google Translate, you can kind of scan
Mm.
Japanese and it'll translate
It's
for you.
I think a lot of people don't know that. Like Google Translate is like next level. Like you can download this app, you can press, like I could have you speaking Japanese and I could press a button and it will listen to you and it will like translate it back and say it back to you in English.
Yeah,
You can take a picture of something and it will like literally, or not even take a picture, you hold your camera over a menu
yeah,
that's in Japanese and it will transcribe in real time
yeah.
it into English, which is like, what? And then but I love that you brought up like that we got to add in there too, that I think a lot of people don't realize that when you're traveling to places like Japan or even Hong Kong or these places in Asia that have are obviously a different language there, that people don't realize those big cities do have English very prevalent. And they have a lot of influx of people who speak English that go there. So I think a lot of people get very worried about the language barrier, and I feel like it's a little less of a issue than a lot of people tend to make it as an
Yeah.
excuse, like not to go somewhere.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't let it get in the way. I would
Yeah.
say go anywhere you want, but yeah, if you have Google Translate, and there are other translation apps too, I think. Um, and I've heard people have conversations, using Google Translate, and a lot of it is lost in translation. But people are able to communicate, and so I think technology has really helped a lot in allowing people to get to these more remote areas, because otherwise, I mean, you wouldn't really be able to find your way around. And one good way to travel too is to rent a car to get to these places,
Okay.
because the rail pass is great. There's the Japan rail pass for those who aren't familiar, where you can only buy overseas, and you can get a really good discount on using the railway, the JR Japan Railway system, but it doesn't go everywhere. And more and more people are coming and renting cars. You have to drive on the left, so you have to get used to that.
Which is a
Yeah,
task I've had to take.
yeah.
Well, is everything stick shift over there like it is kind of in Europe,
No,
or?
no, everything's automatic.
Oh, okay, well then that's a plus.
For the most part, yeah. And all the road signs are bilingual, so you can get
Okay.
around. Yeah, my brother came to visit, and he just rented a car. He'd never been to Japan before. He rented a car at the airport and drove up to where I am and didn't have a problem, because now you have the navigation in
Yeah,
the cars.
absolutely.
So you just punch it in, and so that's one way. I also highly recommend cycling. I've taken up cycling because there's such beautiful cycling where I am, and it's becoming more and more popular in Japan also. And it's a great way, especially if you like hills, if you like going up and down hills. But there's beautiful cycling, and when you get into the countryside, there are very few cars. Uh, Partly because over the past 30 years, they've constructed a lot of tunnels and highways. And so these beautiful old roads through the mountains that barely get any use at all. You can ride for hours and barely see another car, and you're riding through this beautiful countryside and these little villages. And so cycling also is a great way to travel
Wow.
and definitely get off the beaten path that way.
So we've got train travel, and you said you can only purchase those overseas. Like you have to go to Japan and purchase them, or you have to purchase them when you're in another country.
Yeah, you can only purchase them from in another country. The
So if we're in
Japan.
the U.S., we can purchase that ticket. So it's kind of like the U-Rail. I've done a lot of train travel in Europe, where that's kind of where it was. You had to purchase it before you were there, and then you were able to get
Right.
it.
Yeah,
So
make sure you get it before you come, and then.
very interesting. So train travel. You mentioned cycling, and then you mentioned renting a car. How's the bus transportation over there?
The bus transportation can be a little bit tricky. Like there are two different buses that will take you to Gujo Hachiman. One brings you right into the center of town, and then the other one just drops you off on the freeway about a 25-minute walk from town. And so some people have gotten, they didn't understand. They took that bus, and then all of a sudden they're on the side of a freeway, and they have to haul their suitcases for half an hour. And so the buses are a little bit trickier to navigate. But the trains, because they're all connected, you go to any train station and ask, how do I get from A to B? And they can tell you, and also Google tells you. But a lot of the buses will require a reservation, for example, in advance. And while most of them do have English, it's not always that easy to understand or to find the bus stops. Even for Japanese people, finding where the bus actually leaves can be challenging. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not impossible, but it's a bit challenging.
it's not as easy as other modes of transportation. Okay.
Yeah, the trains are a breeze. The trains are easy.
Yeah, so I know that you have a few pictures up of the places that you actually tour or give people tours of. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen here.
Oh,
And I'd love
okay.
for you to describe what you're looking at or what we're looking at.
Well, actually, this is my hometown. So this is a picture of the castle.
Wow, that's pretty.
Yeah, it's a wooden castle. It was taken down during the Meiji era, like a lot of castles were when they wanted to get rid of the all these reminders of their feudalistic past. Unfortunately, it took a lot down, and then they realized, oh, we miss our castle. We'll rebuild it, and so they rebuilt them. And this is a picture of the one of the rivers that runs through the town, the Yoshida River.
Wow.
And you can see it's a pretty small city, and houses on either side of the bank. And this is a little walkway. This is right near my house. This is about a minute away from my house. And there are a lot of these kind of quaint little walkways and stuff. And it's called the City of Water.
Wow. I'm
Because
guessing because of water.
yeah, and so I'm going to go back to there we go. Yeah, okay. Because about 400 years ago, the town burned down.
Oh, wow.
And so they decided when they rebuilt it to create this network of canals. And a lot of towns in Japan had this sort of network of canals, but most of them they just kind of paved over them. But here they still exist, so it's really nice because you're always hearing the sound of water wherever you go. And it's also famous for the water, and the town is at the confluence of three rivers, and that's why they built the castle, because it kind of created a natural moat. So it was built during the Warring States period, so before Tokugawa unified the country and beat all the other lords. Um, it was this period of like over 100 years of civil war. And so this town was established then. And so they built the castle on the hill where it's protected. And where I live now is actually the kind of the red light district, the geisha quarters. So the streets are very narrow, so people could kind of duck in and out of these narrow alleys and not be seen and whatnot.
Sounds like you're talking about a Japanese Amsterdam.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm sure it was a lot more colorful back in those days, but we
Yeah.
still have, and now there are a lot of bars called Snack in my area, which are fun. And by the way, another way to experience kind of off the beaten path Japan would be to duck into some of these rural snack places, which is where the local people go for drinks, and they're a little more expensive than a normal bar.
That's interesting. So it's more expensive than a more touristy bar, is what you mean?
Well, not just a touristy bar, but just a local bar. So you have, most towns might have a bar, a regular bar, but the snack are kind of an interesting experience. And I don't know exactly why they're called snack, but usually there'll be the mama of the snack, usually owned by a woman, and then she might have like a young girl or two working there. Although I actually worked at my local one just uh, for a few weeks just for fun. And people drink and smoke and sing karaoke and just kind of cut loose. And so if you happen to wander into one of these, it's just a little more intimate, I guess, than a regular bar, and you're more likely to interact with other people and maybe sing some karaoke. And but yeah, just be prepared to spend a little bit, in the big urban ones you can spend quite a bit of money, but in the little rural ones, it might cost 23,000 yen or 4,000 yen, which is like $30-$40. But it's
a drink or just in general?
Well, just for in general, yeah. So you sit there,
that's not bad.
Soft drink, they don't charge you by drink. They kind of charge you by the time that you were there.
Oh, that's interesting. So
yeah.
So you got to drink a lot in a short period of time. No,
yeah, you can drink a lot. I mean, yeah, the more you drink, the more they'll charge
No,
you.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Usually they're regulars, and so they have their own bottle. So they'll buy a bottle. They call it a bottle keep. And so they'll buy a bottle of something, and then they put their name on it, and then they got this shelf with everybody's bottles, and you walk in and they pull down your bottle and they.
That sounds so cool. Like, I really want to go to that, and I'm like a huge karaoke fan, so I'm like, please take me to a snack. And it sounds like a great place. That is so cool. And I don't know if you heard about it or not, because it like went viral on TikTok and like all over the internet. But a few days ago, like less than a week ago, probably I think Friday or Thursday of last week, there was this huge sale that happened like through American Airlines and United, where there were round trip tickets from the US in multiple airports, like for future dates, like a bunch of future dates for like $250 round trip, which was like insane. So like someone found out about it and they like posted about it on TikTok. It went like viral in like seconds, and like it was like this whole big crazy thing. Like, and I have a group of travelers that met you, and someone had mentioned it, and we all like literally tried booking tickets, and it like it went so quick. Like in a few hours, like they were all gone, and it was insane. Like for February of next year, and so it's crazy. Just like the people, like I wish I could have gotten one of those tickets because I'm like $250 round trip to Japan. Like what?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing. So I know quite a few people who are going to Japan in February of next year, and just in general too. So hopefully I'll be able to snag up another ticket and get over there next year, and go to a snack.
Yeah, I'll take you for sure.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation? I know we talked about a lot. Is there anything else that is coming to mind that you think you want to throw out there for people?
Yeah, well, I think if you come to Japan, if it's your first time, yeah, I definitely recommend getting off the beaten track, but you probably also want to see, what everybody
comes to Japan to see.
Like Kyoto, for example. And I think if you go to Kyoto, I would say, of course, you can go to the Temple of the Golden Pavilion and the Fushimi Inari, where you walk up the mountain through all the torii gates, which is very famous. You can go to these places, but they are extremely packed. But if you just walk around the city, like if you walk up the Kamo River, and if you visit the shrines instead of the temples, so the temples are Buddhist and the shrines are Shinto, and there are a lot of beautiful shrines that really don't get visited for some reason. And so like the Kamigamo shrine or the Shimogamo shrine, these very beautiful shrines in Kyoto, kind of near the Kamo River, where I go there and there's hardly ever anybody there. So there are places even within, Kyoto or Tokyo where you can get off the beaten path as well. And definitely come to Gujo Hachiman. I highly recommend it. It's a little tricky to get here, so DM me on Instagram if you want to come, and I'll show you how to get here. But you can take a bus to Gujo Hachiman, and or rent a car. And again, for cycling tips, yeah, if you want to follow my Insta account, I do. I kind of document my cycling journeys.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's at a Japan Less Traveled on Instagram, guys. You guys can get that link in the description of the video, and that's awesome. We actually have Where in the World is CL? Christine Luzada, who is saying and recommending the Robot Restaurant in Tokyo. Yeah. So that's awesome. So I know that they have like so many cool little places over there. And yeah, definitely, I never want to not encourage people to go see like what everybody talks about and everything. There's obviously a reason people talk about that, but like going and exploring those off the beaten paths, like I would have never known about a snack. If someone said, want to go to a snack, I'd be like, want to go get a snack? So I love that, and I think that you can definitely learn so much. So I definitely want you to share like how people can get in touch with you. I know you said on Instagram that's the best way, at a Japan Less Traveled. And do you have any other methods? I know that you have some methods that are coming up for people to be able to check out, like a YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a YouTube channel. I'm very inspired by Lucie. So I am going to do that. But yeah, I'd say on Insta, and I'll be, posting about my upcoming channel on Instagram. Awesome. If I do any live tours, then I'll be doing them. I'll probably stream them live on Instagram because that's where my following is. So yeah, and I'll definitely keep people updated about that. So yeah,
very exciting. That is awesome. Well, I love that you came on here. We got to talk about Japan, which I have not been able to travel to yet. I started this Travel Tip Tuesday back in COVID because I was just thinking, what are people looking for? What do people want to hear? Like, they want to hear about like what's to come with travel and like where are different places that they can kind of like daydream about and everything like that. So it's been so cool to like talk with other people in other areas or talk to different travel influencers. And I recently have gotten into the whole talking to tour guides, where you guys, like I said, just have such a passion for what you guys do. So totally recommend everyone who is watching this now and in the future to check out Joshua, check out his Instagram, check out his upcoming YouTube channel that's going to be on the horizon, and all the fun things that are coming, and hopefully maybe the virtual tours he's going to be doing or whatever it might be. There's so many cool aspects, and I'm sure as Japan opens up, you guys are going to have to go and visit there and speak with Joshua to get tour information about how he can help you and guide you throughout the area. So that is, I'm so thankful. Thank you so much, Joshua, for coming on today.
Thank you, Lucie. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. This has been fun.
Absolutely. And for all of you guys who are out here, I do this Travel Tip Tuesday every single week. I have a new guest who comes on and we talk about travel in some way, shape, or form. So if you guys haven't already, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe to my channel so you guys can get updated when I do my other videos with other guests from all around the world and we talk about different topics, as well as you can check out my previous Travel Tip Tuesday videos where I have other guests and we have talked about literally everything from tour guides to flight attendants to travel influencers and all over the world. It's been an amazing journey to just talk to different people. So I'm very thankful for Joshua coming on today. Please make sure to go check out his channel his upcoming channel, but his Instagram and everything that he has to offer. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them his way, my way, leave a comment. And also there are links in the description to where you guys can reach Joshua. So thank you so much again, Joshua. And for everyone else watching out there, I will see you guys next week. Bye.